Welcome to Breakout F. Our next speaker is Rick Boyce, MD Cloud Engineering, A&D Digital. And what Rick's going to be talking about is how the CloudOps model you choose may affect outcomes. So, Rick, over to you.
Thanks, Rich. So yeah, does it? Does the CloudOps model make any difference? Should you care? Is CloudOps model something that will affect the behaviors and the outcomes of a cloud migration, of a cloud transformation? Let's explore it. I'll see if I can convince you over the course of 20 minutes, and then you can tell me in the comments and questions at the end how wrong I got it. My name is Rick. I'm part of the cloud leadership team at Digital. We work with our clients both to build stuff, but also for conversations like this to help people really realize the value in a cloud transformation rather than just putting things in the cloud and doing more of the same in the cloud. An ops model surprisingly comes up a lot, but not necessarily at the point in time that you think it will, and we'll explore that in a sec. First question though, what is a cloud ops model? It sounds complicated, it's really not. It's just a statement of the responsibilities of who does what to make whatever you're running in the cloud successful. It's not really different from any other ops model. I think the reason we think it is complicated is because we often come in, or organizations come into a migration with a kind of working IT ops model built around CapEx. It's built around things having particular lifespans. And I think our challenge is actually to recognize they're quite different things. And what we're designing for is not let's redo our data center in the cloud. What we're designing for is how can we use the power of the cloud platforms we're moving into to accelerate the change we want to achieve in our business. So it's not complicated. It might sound it, but really our job is to strip all of that away. But it's a tool, right? It needs to work for you. And crucially, it's a tool to help understand upskilling and training requirements. The thing, regardless of whether you're migrating into the cloud from scratch, whether you're trying to move into rapid value creation, the thing that will determine whether you fail or succeed is how you upskill and how you train your people. And a lot of your operating model choice needs to come down to your maturity today and then how you grow that over time. And I'm going to focus quite a bit on that. Before we jump into, I'm not going to tell you, by the way, your ops model should be. I'm not going to go say, do this tool, do that tool. I mean, I'm a consultant. We don't do that. You know, we say it depends. But what I will do is give some suggestions on what I think the pros and cons and influences and behaviors are. But really, we should talk first about, well, how do we get into the cloud in the first place? And broadly speaking, we see three types of migration. And I'm going to talk about the default ops model that this tends to yield if you do nothing else. So if you want to move to the cloud, you can move to anyone's cloud. It doesn't matter. I didn't say that. We partner with certain organizations. First thing, we see this lift and shift. We take stuff and we put it in the cloud. And where this tends to come from is some kind of physical event. So we have a data center that we have to be out of by the end of 2024. And so lift and shift is typically framed by like a physical movement of things. It's typically bound by existing resources. Still tactical, but a little bit more kind of broad strokes is an application-driven migration. So this is typically triggered, let's say, you're on SAP and you're moving to the fancy-sounding thing that they're pushing everyone to that I can't remember the name of. This is kind of how we see application-driven migration. We're taking a platform, still not a process, a platform, maybe an ERP system, maybe it's a data platform, data warehouse, maybe we're adding in a bit of data lake and some of our ETL, ELT pipelines. And we're moving to the cloud, and a distinguishing feature from lift and shift is we typically take the opportunity to modernize a little bit during this process. But it's still relatively tactical. And then we see business process-driven migration. And these are typically easy to spot because the framing is very different. They're often framed by business outcomes. We are going to rebuild our customer journey, and we're going to reduce call center volume by 25%. We're going to increase conversion in this onboarding flow by 16%, or you can insert loads of those, you get the idea. Quite cross-cutting. Lift and shift, right? Pretty much, if you do nothing, if you don't think about ops model, what you'll get is your IT ops model from on-prem existing in the cloud. And we'll talk about whether that's a good idea later. You probably guess what I'm going to say. Application-driven. This one's kind of interesting, right? This yields some ops model. This yields some thought. But it's typically very siloed. So what we can end up is, if we have an application-centric migration strategy and we're not careful about ops model, is we get very siloed ops models. Some of them can be very good, but we lose the scalability. We lose that kind of centralized security thinking. We lose a lot of the economies of scale in our ops model that can allow us to really leverage increasing benefit over time. Business process migration, this is typically the one where, because it's a cross-cutting thing, you kind of have to think about ops model, and you might even bring, someone in to think about it, right? So business process migration, if you're at that level, you're probably already thinking about this. But I think it's really important to start with thinking about, if we've got something today, where did it come from? Did it come from a conscious place, or did it come because it was the obvious path in front of us? There's nothing wrong with any of those, but it's important to sort of consciously think about, how do we move forward with this? Most importantly, if you forget everything I just said, when it comes to defining your ops model, start with the value that you want to drive. If you aren't putting a piece of value down on the table, then what are you defining? Are you rebuilding your org structure as an ops model? Are you trying to kind of preserve the existing? You can really just ask yourself this question and go, if there's a kind of value proposition, if there's a piece of value in that framing, you might be on the right path. If you don't know what that is yet, take a step back, take a pause. All right, mandatory, corny cloud picture, because why would I deny myself the opportunity to do this? Let's have a look at what some ops models look like. And crucially, let's start answering that question I posed at the start is, do different models influence different behaviors? Different clouds apparently do different things, only some of them make rain, TIL. So it is with CloudOps models. This is from an AWS white paper on building your CloudOps model that I've shamelessly stolen, and I have stolen it for good reason, because we shouldn't reinvent the wheel here. People have been thinking about this for a long time. I started building stuff in Google App Engine in 2008, and have kind of worked across the cloud since then. And I've had the benefit of making a lot of mistakes. I realize now that I probably could have solved half of those mistakes in advance by just Googling, what is some of this stuff. So reuse. This white paper is a pretty good starting point. If you want it, my LinkedIn's at the end, or we've got a stand up at the top. So come have a chat and we'll get it sent over. But we're going to talk about these 3 ops models because they're a pretty good generalization of what we're going to see. So sustain. AWS have termed this traditional operations, and it's a pretty good description. The distinguishing feature is there are 3 distinct concerns. We have building stuff, we have running stuff and supporting it, and then we have platform sort of engineering. This is kind of how you built a data center and how you built some apps, and then you threw it over the wall to the ops team, and you kind of hope that they could figure out a way to keep it upright. Why would anyone kind of do this in the cloud? It's really quick. If your business value for a cloud migration is an exit event, moving to the ops models we're about to talk about in a sec is involving training, upskilling, it's transforming your teams. This is deliberately labeled transitional because it's a useful tool in our armory if we need to get somewhere quickly. We can largely take the expertise we have today, we can rephrase it in this form, and we can put it in the cloud. That said, it's kind of a done deal once it's there, right? If you stick with this ops model over time, your application is probably not going to move forward from being on some servers in the cloud or being on some containers in the cloud. This is a great model to get in, but it's not necessarily a kind of growth engine for really realizing the value potential of the cloud platforms that you're moving into. So if you look at our next bit, optimize. Distributed DevOps, whatever that means. The big difference here is that we've now moved operations into application engineering. So our build and our ops side are together. Now, first thing, whenever you show this to anyone, engineering manager, VP, whatever, they will say, oh, but all that will happen is my product team will just spend all of their time fixing bugs and dealing with help desk tickets. Not quite. All of these pictures have ITSM, IT Service Management, in the middle. Nothing about your cloud ops model removes the need for effective IT Service Management. How we achieve things like incident management in DevOps, in true DevOps, we'll see in a sec, is by great planning, is having runbooks, is doing incident planning, is actually rehearsing those incidents on a regular basis. Nothing about this model says that your development team is suddenly first-line responders to help desk tickets or getting called at 3 in the morning because a service isn't responding as expected. Part of the model is bringing that into that kind of ITSM core. So don't confuse it with this kind of slightly anarchistic, it's fine, a development team will just do it all and then they won't make progress on delivering new features, delivering new value. Crucially though, platform engineering is still quite distinct here, and it's all, that whole platform layer is done by a separate team. Now, again, this is a little bit quicker to get into. There is more upskilling because we're moving our product team into a DevOps mindset, but we're not necessarily doing a lot of the platform engineering in that space. Again, it's a little bit of an accelerator. It's not necessarily the target state that you want. Why would you not want this as your target state? This cloud platform engineering team is probably staffed with quite smart people, but they're unlikely to be superheroes. The cognitive capacity of that team will give you a slice of services. So it's probably going to be virtual machines, it's probably going to be containers, it might be some serverless or a managed data store. That team is not likely to have the capacity to really understand the ins and outs of an AI ML platform in AWS or a chatbot solution in Google. And so the reason that we might want to move forward from this is that while it gives us access to certain optimizations, it sort of denies us that kind of deep ability to specialize and really drive value quickly by using the really specialized targeted products on the cloud. What it is great for, though, is fixing operational issues. If your focus with a product that you've migrated to the cloud is to improve reliability, is to improve some response times, this is great. This is the behavior it influences, because we've kept platform aside, but we've moved ops together. So suddenly we've got a team that's accountable for building value, building features, but also operating it well or making sure that it operates well. If you've got a really unreliable service, this model drives the behavior of making it reliable, making it stable, making it predictable. And that is the kind of enabler for where we want to move on to next. So, grow. In the AWS paper, this is kind of targeted as the end state. I'll argue in a minute that it might not be the end state for everything. But you can see the sort of distinguishing difference now is what we've done is we've moved our application engineering team, our product team, to span a very significant chunk of both the platform space, the application space, across engineering and operations. And we've got this slice of cloud platform engineering. So this team at the bottom is probably providing a lot of shared services where it makes sense to have that economy of scale. Things like security, things like IDAM are, really benefit from a non-siloed approach. But what's happening in this platform layer is the team with the right governance, with the right support, has been upskilled to the point where they can start making platform selections from the platform that you're in. And typically this could look like, do we move from a virtual machine to a containerized workload or to a serverless workload? But actually that's not the real value proposition of the cloud, right? These cloud providers don't want you to use commoditized services for everything. What the major cloud providers are about is providing really distinguishing sort of value accelerators. So if you want to move into the kind of AI ML space, go hire a data science team, start writing some Python, see how it goes, or take a highly kind of packaged up go-to-market solution from either one of the major cloud providers or a marketplace offering they have, and suddenly you're accelerating that journey. So what this model is really getting at is that ability to drive value from the cloud faster. It's about you working on what's distinctive about your organization rather than you spending most of your time thinking about platform services. I'm probably likely to buy from you for the distinguishing features of your product. I hope that you're good at keeping servers up, but it's probably not what I'm Googling for when I'm looking for, new product or service X. So this is often posed as the kind of the gold standard, the kind of target state. Let's talk about whether that's true. The thing that it drives is all of the things previously, but again, that ability for the team to make sensible choices about how to really accelerate value creation. The downside is the time to achieve it. The upskilling, the training, the expertise required here is much greater. The investment to achieve it is much greater. And so if we look at all of these, you could view them as a sort of transition over time, and that everything must move from left to right. And sometimes you will see people pitch that. I don't agree. Not every product you have, not everything you're going to migrate to the cloud warrants the level of investment to move into grow. You actually might have a service that's running on-prem somewhere today really successfully. It's driving the value that it needs to drive, and your strategy as a business does not involve materially changing the service. So in designing your CloudOps model, really you shouldn't think about getting everything to the same state. What you need to think about is, what is the right positioning to unlock the value I want? So there are workloads that will quite happily sit indefinitely in sustain. Their pace of change, their pace of new development or new value creation might be lower, but that might be okay if that's the plan. You have to be really conscious about the investment to get to the right. It's a good state to go into a new application build. If I want to start a new service today and I'm in the cloud, I'm probably going here, or I might be in Optimize working with my team to move to Grow. But I have to be conscious of the cost of that. You know, it comes down to, very boring phrase, isn't it? But a bit of a TCO consideration. It's more than the cost of the cloud services. It's the cost of the upskilling. It's the cost of sustaining that level of expertise over time. But here's my suggestion on this, hopefully building on that point. Your CloudOps model is not your org chart. And I feel that might be an obvious thing, but surprisingly, you see a lot of CloudOps models that are an org chart. Don't do that. Please, would be my suggestion. Drive it from the business need. So for each of those applications, for each of those workloads, ask those awkward questions. What do we want to do with this? Is this part of our kind of next strategy? Where's it going? Again, that quote at the start being about business value, drive the ops model for the business need. It may well be the case that not everything you have is sat in the same ops model. Some of them may be moving to the right over time, but some of them may be in the right place for the level of investment versus the value that you're driving. And I would argue that is the bit to get down before you kind of set out the nuts and bolts. So, if we're already doing some of this, how do we... When I started consulting, and it was pretty much all on site, and they always taught you about this thing called like the sniff test. Like, how do you go into a team and know how do you know where the problems are? How do you know where the skeletons are likely to be hiding? So I'll talk about, I have helpfully, on the train down, boiled down all of the problems into two distinct camps that I'm going to talk to you about. There is chaos, and then there is castle building. I sometimes call this anarchy, but people tell me that anarchy is a good thing, so I'm going to call it chaos. So, chaos is surprisingly common, and you might think it's a thing that startups do, but actually very big organizations kind of exist in complete cloud chaos. And what this tends to look like is just people doing stuff, but the idea that the end-to-end is actually just getting it into production, and let's not worry about it from there. It's the kind of environment where maybe every different department is signing up for a different cloud, making their own account, using the department credit card, they're firing whatever, there's no consideration for kind of security, for sustainability, for maintainability. Chaos looks really successful for a really short amount of time. You can have a golden 9 months where you're achieving more than you've ever achieved, and it sounds fantastic. But at some point, something will bring this house of cards down. It's frequently a security incident, unfortunately. Watched a very good talk from Laura a moment ago about the importance of us all remaining compliant and, regardless of whether we control the data, owning the security of it, which I heartily believe. And unfortunately, the reality is that the chaos model often comes undone when something bad goes wrong on the security point of view. The other way it goes wrong is a new financial controller or a new CFO comes in and goes, do you have any idea how much we're paying Microsoft, Google, and Amazon for cloud services? Okay, castle building being the other one. This tends to happen when cloud transformation is not viewed as a business strategy or a business priority, but is something that's given to the IT people, and it's like, just move us to the cloud. And this is the kind of often an unfortunate consequence of a lift and shift kind of result. Well, what we've done is we've taken all the stuff that we've known for decades about how to run on-prem IT really well, and we've rebuilt it in the cloud, and now we're going to be very protective of it, because we've got our golden images and we've got all of our scanning tools, and we don't want anyone to use anything else. You can normally spot this because this is the kind of organization where someone goes, can we use DynamoDB? And they go, no, we use this particular SQL server on this particular image, and it will cost you 10 grand a month regardless of what you're doing with it. This is normally successful in a very limited sense, i.e. it kind of will replicate what you had before. It will probably cost a lot, because what tends to happen in this model is a lot of the services that we used to have to worry about ourselves when we were managing our hardware, we recreate, we run all of these random appliances and scanning things without ever really talking to our cloud vendor about, what's in the contract actually, like what do we need to do, what's our responsibility versus what your responsibility is. So it's the kind of, just put it all in the cloud the same and it will be fine. Normally where this becomes undone is just that value creation stagnates, it doesn't happen. It can be quite successful, but if the desire is to move forward more quickly, so develop products more quickly, get things to market faster, experiment, innovate more, normally the root cause of a lot of that not happening after an apparently successful migration is this kind of sort of we're the platform team, walls mindset. Neither of these are the result of bad people. And I want to be really, really clear about that. Both of these are leadership failures. This is not an incompetent IT team that has done this. This is not people that want to hoard and protect their own interests. The honest answer is I've very rarely seen that. This is normally just a failure of leadership to engage in cloud transformation as a strategic choice for a business instead of, the data center contract's coming up for to end and we don't want to commit the 50 million capex. Just move to the cloud and we'll worry about it later. Tends to be good and good intentions, good people, skilled people underneath this. It's normally just that the conversation stops at the IT department's door. So, if I've said what not to do, in my view, with your platform team, what do I think you should do? Do they have a role? Is there a point of a platform team? Well, yeah, absolutely. A huge part of transforming an organization to use the cloud effectively is about recognizing where value needs to sit in product teams and where value needs to be supported centrally to yield economies of scale. So if we move towards a product model, so if you think about that kind of chart before, where our product team is owning most of the build, most of the ops, most of the platform, supported by good ITSM, generally speaking, what we see is an empowered product team that have accountability into and out of governance. Often sort of the sustainability aspect comes in through governance, through enterprise architecture, through portfolio management, and FinOps often comes in and out of portfolio management, and through business strategy. Whether that's a big hit for the product or a small hit for the product, it still has to be there. These accountabilities need to be two-way. It is a poor governance and enterprise architecture department that feel that their remit is to say no. And this comes back to driving things from business value. To make this work, to make a kind of forward-looking CloudOps model work, there has to be a single set of drivers. You can't have a security team that's view is to lock the world down and stop anything happening. They have to be accountable and aligned to the same objectives, the same KPIs as all of these other teams. So this creates joint accountability by being aligned around a use case, a set of business value, a set of KPIs, OKRs, whatever your management consultancy of choice have decided to install upon you. What does the platform team do? Again, this is an evolution over time. So at the beginning, our platform team will probably have to be pretty hands-on in the sort of details of making happen. So frequently we see that as embedding in teams. Just try to avoid it being doing. Don't send me a ticket and I'll give you a Kubernetes cluster. Let's talk about why that's a good design choice, why that's a good piece of infrastructure, and then let me come work with you and embed to make this happen. Typically, platform teams early on in this kind of transformation have a very hands-on mentoring and supporting role, frequently being embedded in the right team at the right time to help the transition. But over time, that team's role changes to one of being real subject matter experts in unlocking value from the platform or the platforms you've chosen. So the role looks like coaching your product teams, challenging them, bringing ongoing upskilling. The world we exist in has probably changed permanently in the last 6 months with pretty rapid progress from certain large language models. It would be pretty foolish to think we could set something today and that will be our kind of desired target state in 5 years' time. But we've got product teams that are focused on driving strategic value today. So somewhere that voice of moving forward, continuous improvement, upskilling, horizon scanning needs to come. And crucially, these are highly skilled people who are becoming or are already subject matter experts in your platform of choice. They're here to help. I've talked about joint accountability. When stuff goes wrong, your platform team can't wade in and wag their finger and go, you did it all wrong. They share that accountability with you. They're there to dive in, help support you in solving a problem, learning from the problem, but crucially disseminating that knowledge, upskilling across the rest of the organization so we all kind of move forward together. Really crucial role from the platform team, but I'm trying to get across that difference between sort of doing and sort of taking it in and sort of doing the work, rather than facilitating and enabling product teams to become more self-sufficient, more effective over time. So final thought on this, don't design the best CloudOps model in the world today if your organizational maturity around this just isn't there to achieve it yet. Your success and pace in moving today will come from the right ops model for today. If what you need to do is a lift and shift so you can be out of a data center by the end of summer, You're going to have to move really quickly. But know that that upskilling, that training, that support, that evolution needs to come in time. It's a journey. Go on the journey. Evolve. The first version of this talk I did was a chat with a client at a conference in Manchester. And what really stood out to me is a client in the defence sector. And what really stood out to me from this client wasn't how much they were getting right, and they really were getting a lot right today. It was how disastrous the first iteration had been. They'd just thrown stuff at the cloud and hoped for the best. And I think the thing that really struck me about this leadership team is they were brave enough to step back and ask themselves the hard questions and go, is the track we're on going to lead us to where we've said we're going to get to? No. How do we change? How do we get there? But guess what? They would never have got sort of up the exponential growth part of the graph if they'd gone for gold on day one. They had to go through the slightly chaotic lift and shift phase because they had genuine business pressures. The trick isn't that they designed something unachievable up front. The trick is that they had the confidence, the bravery, and the commitment to evolve it over time, ask the hard questions. Okay, thank you.